Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's Live at the Waterhole. My name is Ben Coley. I will be with you for the next 2 hours, and we will go on our daily voyage across all of the cameras from Africam and for Safari Live and Wild Earth. And we're very, very excited to see everything that's been happening over the last few days. I know myself, having not done a live at the waterhole session for over a month now, due to other commitments, and having been fortunate enough to go to Mabulla and to Juma, I'm very excited to see what Gary Dam looks like at Juma after all the rain that they've had over the last two. But for now, we have started in Tembe Elephant Park in the eastern side of the country, where it doesn't look as if they've had much rain, looking at the level of the water. But wonderful again to see some elephants as always. Don't forget, this is live and interactive. So if you are watching and you have any questions or comments that you would like to send through, please do so, and I will do my best always to answer them. And if I don't know the answer, I have a few books on hand and a connection, and I will see if I cannot find out the answer. It's always great to hear from you, and gives me a chance to increase my knowledge in certain areas. But yeah, lovely to see this group of elephant bulls. Certainly when I was doing more and more of the live in the waterholes over the last few months, this little group of males was almost a stalwart. Seeing them on an almost daily basis, and it was wonderful to try and watch their individual interactions and try and understand bachelor groups of elephants a little bit better in terms of how they figure out their hierarchies and how they communicate with each other. We spent an awful lot of time looking and discussing breeding herds because it's so obvious. But it's also very interesting to watch how these males also interact with one another. There's a lot more going on than we realize, and how lovely to see one of them at least going in for a swim. I don't blame him. Penelope Kenyon, you have joined us. Greetings to you as well, and happy New Year to you. Thank you very much for your wishes. And you're having a hot, humid day in KZN. I'm not surprised. It's very hot and very humid pretty much across South Africa at the moment. We have had some rain, and then with the temperatures involved, a lot of evaporation and massive humidity. I was out in the garden yesterday doing some work. It was only claimed it was about 32 degrees yesterday, but I was dripping within minutes. The humidity has been pretty brutal of late, but we're in such desperate need of the water. We are certainly not complaining up here in the Lowveld. For those of you who don't know, I am based in Hoedspruit, so very close to the Northern Savi Sands, Timavati, Kasiri, that sort of area. And some other greetings coming through from Mercedes Bin. Greeting to you as well, saying hello to myself, the Wild crew, and all of you wonderful chatters. And from Catherine as well. Greetings, Catherine. Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where everybody is from, of course. Oh, this one's going to have a bit of a sit down, and I do not blame him. Obviously, we know it's difficult for elephants to right themselves after they do lie down, but I'm always surprised that we don't get more activity like this in the larger dams. It's not often that you get elephants actually going in and submerging themselves or having a roll around. Yes, it causes strain on their muscles to get up and sit down and stand up, but you would have thought the benefits outweigh the additional effort and strain on those joints. Well, so Eric was talking recently about elephants potentially getting arthritis. I'm not surprised, carrying that great bulk around, but thermoregulation is so important. I am surprised we don't see them do it more often. We're so akin to seeing rhinos wallowing in the mud and hippos obviously spending most of their life under the water like that. I'm surprised elephants don't do it more often. Animal lover, you're asking whether all elephants form bachelor herds or whether some remain solo. Um, Younger ones very, very likely will do. I mean, again, I can't give you a succinct and definitive answer on that because it will depend on population numbers, on available space, on resource availability, and all of the other things. But as a general rule, often younger elephants will stay together, by no means guaranteed. Particularly the older bulls like to go off wandering on their own for long periods of time and may not associate with any other males for months and months on end. It would be interesting to know, and there probably have been studies done, but I am unaware of any specifically to show whether members of a group like this, for example, if separated, I have no doubt they would recognize each other again over a period of time, but whether or not there is an official bond or a desire to sort of regain um, association with each other, that I'm not, then absolutely they do form these bonds. We know that they are social animals, so the longer they spend together, I'm sure the stronger those bonds become. And so it also makes you wonder how often we do see individual bull elephants quite regularly, but I've no doubt that there are multiple members of that group in the vicinity. We know how far their communications travel, their infrasonic rumblings, and who knows what else that they are passing between themselves. Certainly scent as well. They'll be conscious of each other. And just because we do see one, it certainly doesn't mean that they are themselves isolated. But those old bulls, say, often do go walkabout for very, very prolonged periods of time. Nice to see so many other antelopes around as well. Impalas, and I saw some Inyalas on the other side of the dam. This lovely green flush, everything benefiting today. And delightful to see some young ones skipping around as well in the foreground. Beautiful big bull there at the back. You can see his very, very wide forehead, suggesting a giant of a good age, certainly. Of course, remember with elephants, that's you're going to get taller elephants and bigger elephants than others, just like you have taller people and shorter people. But a telltale sign will be the girth across the bridge of the nose and the size of the head in general. So, from this perspective, at least, he doesn't look like the biggest elephant I've ever seen, but a very substantial, um, broad area across the nose, certainly. This one at the front just gave a rather disdainful kick to that dung there. I did see something very funny on a video. Was it yesterday? I think yesterday of Elephants that turned tail and ran off down the road after a tiny baby warthog who can't have been more than about 20 centimeters in length came running towards it along the road. And this poor elephant got such a fright that he turned around and ran the other direction. Just shows you maybe they are indeed afraid of mice, but they certainly don't like unusual things, fast moving things. I guess it's like us with a spider running around your feet or one of those horrifying solifuges. But yes, not every day that you see a baby warthog chase off a full grown elephant bull. But it just goes to show, say, if you do ever find yourself in a one on one situation with an elephant on foot, the most important thing you can do is stand your ground and necessarily act aggressively if you just want to project confidence more than anything else. But if it starts to be a particularly, let's put in inverted commas, dangerous situation, if you can be the aggressor in the situation, you've got a very good chance of being okay. It's all psychology. So we've had a couple more very pleasant greetings come in. Wendy H, Happy New Year to you and your family also. Greeting the Wild Earth crew from a very hot Port Elizabeth. Right, well, what a lovely way to start a very pleasant afternoon here at Tenby. But we are going to zoom over to the sands and let's have a look at the waterholes after the recent rains. Multiple Egyptian geese. Oh, wow. And a water monitor. That's very, very cool to see. I had an amazing sighting of a water monitor whilst I was at Juma, but it was on a Monday, so we were just out doing virtual content filming. And we spent about 20 minutes with the most relaxed water monitor I've ever come across. He was basically like snuffling around by our tires in one of the dry riverbeds there. Uh, kept digging for things, whether he's looking for beetle larvae. My thought was perhaps looking for frogs, maybe some of the sand frogs, lots of tremolo sand frogs and russet back sand frogs that like to bury themselves. But yeah, rest assured, I have returned. Hopefully, you can still hear me now. But yeah, a bit of a face-off going on between these Egyptian geese and this water monitor. I'm not sure at what point you lost me, but this little water monitor, or good-sized water monitor, was incredibly relaxed, quite happy busying himself using those strong claws. Ooh, the geese are very trusting of this monitor. Not that the geese are in particular danger, but they could still give them a nasty bite. Containing a little bit of venom as well. That one's thought better of it. But yeah, so this one in the riverbed was quite happily scratching around, I think trying to dig up frogs more than anything else. To which, if I sound a bit croaky, I'm sorry, I seem to also have a frog stuck in my throat this afternoon. But he didn't catch anything the whole time we were there. But yeah, I have ever experienced Lots of geese enjoying this little puddle. Animal lover? No, I don't think a monitor lizard would eat something as big as a goose. I have no doubt that they will quite happily take a small bird. Um, if there was a goose dead in the water, I see no reason why the monitor wouldn't feed from it. But I've never heard of a water monitor attacking a goose, but maybe we'll see something incredible. As I say, I don't want to say it's never happened, but it's not something that I'm aware of, certainly. But I see no reason why it couldn't. I mean, it's a powerful animal with that big tail, hugely muscular, and so recent research has suggested that monitor lizards do have a venom in their saliva. I doubt it would be of particular danger to something like an Egyptian goose, but I don't know. I see there was a question came through a little earlier. Picasso, you were referring to, of course, our collaborations in India. You're asking whether tall deer drop their antlers. They do, as I understand it. Anyway, they are antlers as opposed to horns, so they do shed them each year and grow them back in time for the breeding season. So it's not something I know too much about. Obviously, we have nothing here in South Africa that sheds their antlers. We have nothing with antlers. They only have horns, so a bony protrusion attached to the skull with that keratin sheath over the top. If it breaks, it breaks. It doesn't grow back. I have seen chital deer, and wow, I'm going back many, many years. Wow, 2025 now. So I've been going back about 27, 28 years. I did go to India. I was lucky enough to visit Ranthambore National Park and did see samba deer. That was the other one that I saw, but didn't see anything in the process of shedding. But that's an awesome opportunity to witness some of those things. And I was lucky enough to see a couple of tigers out in the wild and a leopard as well. But unfortunately, I have no photographs to show for it. Regrettably, whilst I was traveling from Delhi up to Nepal to go up to the Himalayas for a week or so, which was one of the most spectacular experiences of my life. Unfortunately, my bag was taken from my possession, which included my camera, and that was pretty much the last leg of the couple of months that I spent out there. So I lost my camera, and back in those days, I was still using a film camera, and all the film that I had taken up till then was in the bag. So unfortunately, yeah, don't have anything to show for it, but some wonderful memories at least, if nothing else. Yeah, amazing to see so many Egyptian geese all in one area. They're normally very sort of territorial over the water, but I suppose there's plenty of it around at the moment. Lovely to see some water in Gary Dam. Lots more filling up to be done. But when I was there, there was a tiny bit of just about viscous mud right at the bottom of it, and that was about it. As he Spuss, you'd also asked whether the um, water monitor or Nile monitor um, would be a threat to the Egyptian goose chicks. I would think absolutely it would. That's a nice, tasty mouthful. I just did do a quick search to see if I could find any reports of monitors taking adult geese. I couldn't find anything from a quick search, but I wouldn't be surprised if it has happened. They can get very large, up to best part of a couple of meters in size, and very, very powerful animals. But yeah, normally Egyptian geese are quite territorial over their water and they squawk and cackle at any others that even fly overhead. So interesting to see so many of them all together. But somebody else enjoying this little bit of water now, the blacksmith lapwing, another stalwart of most water bodies in this part of the country. These striking markings. Of course, what this water will have done will have brought forth a massive amounts of arthropod activity. I've noticed it here, just where I am in Huddersfield. We've had rain recently. There's a lot more bugs, weird things flying around. At your peril, leave your windows open at night with the lights on because you can barely move for all the uninvited guests that find their way into your house. So, with this water, all of those little arthropods, which may have been dormant in the soil, will be active. And with that little probing beak, be poking the beak into the mud there, looking for all sorts of little critters that are now active in there. Great food source for many things. I've seen a marked increase in a number of things like swifts and swallows flying overhead, hawking insects. The paradise feature in the garden. Okay, again, sorry if I disappeared for a moment. I may be having one or two connection issues. But I see we've had a question coming through, or a comment from, well, question slash comment from George. You're asking if the rock monitor is more dangerous than the water monitor. I suppose that depends on your situation, George, to be honest. Rock monitor is a bit more chunky, certainly, but the water monitor is sleeker and quicker. So both are voracious predators or opportunistic feeders, certainly. So birds, eggs, small mammals, whether one is more dangerous than the other, I wouldn't like to say. I think it's, as I said, very much depends on your preference. So nice to see so much greenery, and it's amazing to see how the grass has recovered. I'll say, whilst I was there, it was ridiculous how brown things were coming, just not what you would expect to see at this time of year. We had like I say, a little bit of rain just before I arrived. There was a lovely flush of green. I could see a lot of the grasses coming through. Actually able to identify grasses for the first time in months. But yeah, whilst I was there, a lot of the grass was browning off and really beginning to struggle. A lot of the young shoots on the trees as well. A little bit of a chase going on there with the geese. All right, but that was lovely to check in at Duma and actually see some water there and plenty of greenery. Let's head up to Victoria Falls and have a look, see what's happening up by the Vulture Restaurant. Looks like they've had some rain there, right? In terms of vultures, I see a few in the tree, one or two poking around on the ground. It's strange to see this wandering around on the floor like this. Yeah, I haven't seen all that many vultures of late myself. Lucky enough, where I stay, very close to the escarpment. I can see the mountains if I look carefully. And thanks to that, or I'm lucky enough to quite often see Cape vultures flying overhead, which very similar to the whiteback vulture, but larger and bulkier in terms of their morphology. Easiest way to identify the two of them, if you ever do get the opportunity, is where you see the whitebacks flying overhead, because normally with vultures, of course, we just get to see the underwings. The whiteback vulture is generally black and white, sort of half and half, trailing edge of the feathers being darker, which is often the case because that is melanin. And melanin makes things tough, so good for the feathers in terms of dealing with the rigors of flight. So whitebacks generally half half, and then with the Cape vulture, you'll find that most of the underwing is a whitish colour, or much lighter certainly, but it has very dark wing tips. So sort of the fingers of the wings are much darker in contrast to the undersides. And you'll often find with these larger birds of prey that the bigger the bird, the more widespread those we call them fingertips are at the end of the wings, the primaries there. And that's just a really clever way of dealing with the air pressure differential. So obviously for the bird to gain lift, the air passes at different speeds on the upper side and the underside of the wing, and then at the back, those different speeds and different pressures have to rejoin and merge together, and that can actually lead to some unstable environments, instability, and a bit of turbulence. So by having those widespread primaries, those fingertips, it allows those two pressures to bleed together with a lot more fluidity, I suppose, as good a word as any. So it just leads to less turbulence. It looks like whitebacks in the tree and a few hooded vultures wandering around on the ground with their smaller beaks. I believe it's almost feeding time. I've just been informed, so hopefully we'll see some action, and it'll be amazing to see how many more vultures just arrive. Although it has been raining up there, so we'll see. Because there are a lot of large birds. Oop, I think they know something's happening. A lot of large birds, of course, will not be doing too much flying around on wet days because they're big and they're heavy, and water makes it more difficult to fly. Less thermals rising off the ground and expending a lot more energy. But I think word has been spread. The dinner bell has been rung. Plenty coming in now. Because obviously this is a slightly more artificial situation, and the birds have learnt the behaviour here. But this whole sort of behaviour of vultures just arriving at the carcass with minimal warning is what led to one of the reasons that they are in such decline at the moment, with the traditional muti trades, the traditional medicine market of using various parts of the vulture to assist with foresight, believing that vultures can see the future, and that's how they know things are about. That sometimes we just can't pick them out with our primitive eyes, but they can see an awful lot more. They know what's happening down on the ground. Their eyes are so sensitive, and they will take their cues from each other and from other birds of prey, like the tawny and the battalier eagles, and they will all descend en masse onto a potential kill. There was a bit of a spate when the lotteries started of vultures being persecuted to try and give people a bit of a leg up in the lotteries. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, there is, of course, no scientific evidence to suggest that anything in the internal workings of a vulture will assist with any sort of future predictions. But it is a highly sought after and revered bird culturally. Ah, here comes lunch. There is a constellation in the night sky, Lyra, the Orpheus's harp, is also known as the falling eagle in Arabic and in Indian cultures, and it contains the fifth brightest star in the sky, Vega, which also stems from Arabic etymology referring to a falling eagle, or sorry, a falling vulture. Everybody waiting patiently. Who's gonna go first? And cue feeding frenzy. Wow, it's amazing. There'll be nothing left in minutes. I've seen it enough times, and it never ceases to amaze me how quickly a massive number of vultures like this can dismantle a carcass. I've seen full-grown antelopes picked completely clean in a matter of hours. It's amazing how efficient the cleanup crew can be. The city's been, you're happy it's feeding time. I think not as happy as the vultures by the look of it. It's almost mesmeric. They move so fluidly like water. Plus, we've got a marabou stork in the background as well, waiting for its opportunity. I see Harriet Hodgkin. Sorry, it took me a while to get to your message there, Harriet. Thank you very much again for your season's greetings. Same to you too. And yes, I hope to be back at Juma again at some point soon. We'll have to see what life has in store, but would always relish the opportunity. Certainly looks over the last few days. There have been, oh, rather ironically, from the morning that I left, there's been a spate of cat sightings, lots of sightings of Columba and Chipondo, her cub. So it's like mating lions and all sorts. I was watching last night when Liam had the wild dogs that managed to grab themselves an impala lamb. All sorts happening up there at the moment. Harriet, you also saying you're amazed how well behaved the vultures are. Yeah, they'll just keep their distance. And the second people are out the way, utter chaos. It's us. I'm glad you're also enjoying the vulture feeding time. It is amazing to watch. And how long has it been? A minute? 90 seconds, maybe? And already you can see everyone sort of milling around, just wondering if there's any scraps left. There'll be some very, very full crops. Oh, a couple of arguments out on the right there. That's one of those great adaptations that some birds have, is that crop, to be able to just gobble down as much food as possible, store it in the crop, and then take it away and digest it in your own time. Just allows you to grab as much as possible and deal with the competition of a chaotic situation like this. And of course, there'll be some pre-digestion done in the crop. There'll be enzymes being released. And once it goes down the esophagus into the proventriculus and then into the gizzard, that's when all the magic takes place. And all of the nutrients and the moisture and all the good things will be absorbed. Kind of look like a Roman phalanx, don't they? Reminds me of a scene out of Gladiator. Our Laura Moore, I don't know what they're eating, if I'm honest. I'm just going to sit on the fence and say meat. Um, quite what they are given, I'm not sure, or whether or not it is sourced locally, shall we say, or whether it's done through donations. I'm not 100% sure what. So vulture's not traditionally fussy. Whatever it was, there's not much left of it to analyze and give you the answer, I'm afraid. It is already nothing more really than some sort of hopeful squabbling, seeing if anything was left behind. They bounce around. Actually, incredible birds. If you look at them up close, they've got this horribly unsavory reputation. Again, thanks to things like Disney. But they're actually incredible birds. They are so well put together, so well adapted, and very, very beautiful if one actually has a closer look at them and gets over that stigma. George, good question. Do they have sharper beaks than other birds? I don't know about sharper beaks, but they have very, very strong beaks, certainly. I imagine they have a pretty good cutting edge, but they don't slice their way through meat. It's more about ripping chunks off. So big hooked, sort of notched beaks to grab hold of the flesh and tear it away. Beak and experienced it. So again, sorry, it sounds like you may have lost my sound for a moment, but George, I'm not sure how much of that you got, but I was just saying I don't know exactly how sharp specifically they are, but they're very, very strong hooked beaks for tearing flesh. Some of the smaller ones, not so much so, and obviously the bigger the vulture, the stronger the animal, but they're unable to open the carcass of an animal. Most of the whitebacks and the hoodeds have to wait for the larger vultures like the lappet-faced, which has the biggest beak of all. They are capable of opening a carcass, of ripping it open, grabbing hold of that flesh and tearing it. But I don't think there's too much in terms of a scissoring, cutting action. It's more about brute force. Sigran, you're asking whether the vultures are also eating dead animals or only here. I have no doubt that they have the learnt behavior. They know and trust this as a food source. But if something was to die of natural causes, I have absolutely no doubt that they would take the opportunity. Of course, not all of them all at the same time. It'll be depending on who is fortunate enough to see that carcass. I mean, just looking at the vegetation here, a lot of mapani. This time of year, if something was to succumb under a tree, it would be a lot more difficult for the vultures to see it. so they may have to use other cues. But I have absolutely no doubt that should they come across something that has died of natural causes, they will happily feast upon that as well. They're not going to turn their nose up at it. And I see Penelope Kenyon, you've said that they've read that in this area the vultures are fed scraps of bones and things from nearby restaurants. That does make perfect sense. It is a big conservation initiative at the moment to try and help and protect the vultures. It's a good thing to be involved with. And it is just waste product. So rather give it back to the natural environment and allow the vultures to do their great job. Which is, of course, to return all these nutrients to the nutrient cycle. That's exactly their role in nature. So why should we deny it then? The skulking marabou storks towering above the vultures there. But say they do not have bills which are very well designed to open flesh. They have to wait their turn. They are funny looking things, these marabou storks. So I've grown to love them over the years. I used to be very critical of their aesthetics. They really are not a pretty bird. In fact, they are really, and it's not often you'll hear me say this because I love birds, but they are really ugly. But they're still amazing things. I mean, enormous birds when you see one up close or have one fly overhead, about a 3 meter wingspan. It's a mightily impressive bird, even if not the prettiest, but still performs, again, a vital role. But I might do a little bit more reading myself on this specific vulture restaurant. I don't know too much about the one in Vic Falls, but of course we are very thankful for all of this. And so it's nice to know there's such a healthy population in this area, even if they are reliant upon our assistance. But it's about time we gave something back. We take away an awful lot from nature. So nice to see something being returned. Fuller, you're saying that they're wonderful birds and we need them in nature. I couldn't agree more. So without vultures, without any of these decomposer animals or these, I shouldn't really call them decomposers, these tertiary consumers would be the appropriate ecological term for them. So we would have an awful lot more disease, an awful lot more flies, and all those things associated with rotting carcasses. So I, for one, as are you, Philip, very grateful for it. Speaking of us giving things back, I read an interesting thing yesterday. I was doing some reading up on frogs. Of course, this on-running problem of the cicrid bacteria that grows on their skin and is a major problem for frogs worldwide. This bacteria that causes them to ultimately die from heart attacks. It stops their skin from regulating water and electrolyte flows properly. Some species don't seem to be as badly affected as others, but many are on the brink of extinction or have become extinct thanks to this bacteria, which was introduced from Asia due to the pet trade and research and frogs being shipped around the world. It seems some recent research suggests that that bacteria really struggles at higher temperatures, and those frogs are a particular risk during the cooler winter periods. It's another reason why frogs at higher altitudes are particularly susceptible to it due to the lower temperatures. And there's been a bit of a push at the moment to make frog saunas to assist frogs during those colder temperatures, and they've got scientifically or statistical evidence to suggest that in those warmer temperatures, that bacteria is no longer so effective or so prevalent, and many of the frog species are able to survive and shake off that infection or that infection. It's important that we keep trying to find simple ways. I mean, it's how simple is that? Creating warmer environments for frogs in winter to give them a little bit of a helping hand. Yeah, just a little bit of natural thinking could be the difference between a species succumbing to extinction and not. Hey, Rosie Adams, happy 2025 to you too. It is lovely to be back again. Always enjoy these live at the waterholes for the diversity that we see in different areas. And so, having not seen these cameras much over the last 6 weeks or so due to other work and festive responsibilities, shall we say, it's always nice to see the difference. Some of the cameras were looking so dry and desolate. I mean, the hyena pan was looked like a just a desert. Obviously, the places in Namibia, which generally always do, be interesting to see what they look like, whether they've had any rain recently. But it's wonderful to see Gary Dam with water in after basically hardly seeing, well, only seeing mud and a tiny bit of mud at that for the couple of weeks that I was in Juma. Always nice to catch up with all of these characters. It's certainly a little bit of order being restored here. See the occasional bit of scrapping going on. Interesting to know the relationships between vultures. Again, I don't know too much about that. They obviously form monogamous pairs, but in a situation like this, I've no doubt there'll be a hierarchy between individuals, but I imagine it will just be based more on enthusiasm, shall we say, and behavior at that particular kill site or at that carcass. Interesting to know whether individuals would recognize each other or do recognize and greet one another. More and more beginning to disperse now. So a little bit more effort having to be exerted to get those full bellies or full crops off the ground. You can see the how much effort the massive pectoral muscles creating enough airflow and lift to get those big birds off the ground. They often do have to have a bit of a run up after they've had a big meal. Definitely beginning to disperse now. I think there is very little left. Nina Brown, just want to make sure I understand your question correctly. You're saying how do reserves make sure the population of species that get aid like this increased? Um, well, most reserves, sort of private reserves certainly, or well-run, managed, maintained reserves will have an ecologist. They will have section rangers. They will have reserve managers, and often they will have interns or employees whose job it is to look at specific organisms, specific species, be it the vultures, be it the ground hornbills, be it the leopards, whatever the species in question. And there will be research being done, and there's a lot of what we call citizen science involved as well. So you'll find if you go into Kruger, there's often initiatives. I remember one a few years ago on the yellow-billed oxpeckers, the saddle-billed storks. That whenever you see or have sightings of these animals, GPS log them, and if you can take photographs for identification purposes and then send it through to the relevant person searching that species, and they will do regular counts. In the case of birds, they'll be ringing. Um, but of course, they can't do that for every species. So a lot of it will be um, struggling for words, sort of making assumptions based on what is being seen, but a lot of observation, a lot of recording of data, and trying to figure out what is working, what isn't working, what else could be done. A lot of reserves work in tandem with universities and other um, I can't speak. Research-based organizations, organizations is the word I was looking for. And they will send their data through to those people who will keep a much closer eye on it and perform a variety of statistical checks and have records potentially going back many, many years. See this marabou wandering around, hoping for the best, looking for any scraps. But things certainly seem to have settled. We saw a little bit of disputes between individual vultures, which was unsurprising. Speaking of interesting ways to protect yourself, I also, again, slightly off topic, but I found it very interesting. Some new behavior that has been seen recently in something called, I think it's the coconut octopus, which I think is somewhere in Asia. And they will often take discarded coconut shells or clam shells and they sort of stick them together and they move around and then they use them as sort of protective armor. But sometimes, if a large fish is loitering close by, whilst not necessarily a threat to the occupier, and actually filmed that they will gather small rocks and small stones, and because octopuses have got that little scythe, which is the thing they use to propel themselves across the sea floor, they can actually sort of load up that siphon with little rocks and then fire it like a cannon, for want of a better word, at fish. And there was footage of octopuses firing little stones and hitting fish square in the face to make the fish move out of the way and stop drawing attention to the octopus. I just thought that was absolutely amazing. There's so many cool little things that nature does that we would never thought to check. Not really relevant for vultures, but I'm just thinking of the personal space issues that vultures would have around a carcass. But how cool is that? So octopuses use their siphons to fire little stones at fish. Okay, I think we're going to head up to Lentora in Kenya for a little bit more birding. Let's see what's happening up there. Now the white-browed sparrow weavers and some, uh, I'm going to say the sparrows, the grey-headed sparrows, but we get southern and of course you do get northern grey-headed sparrows. I'm not sure in Kenya whether these would be northern rather than southern. Saying having never actually visited Kenya, I've spent time in Tanzania, but not in Kenya. So I'm just going to stick with grey-headed sparrow of either northern or southern. beaver there as well. Oh, beautiful. 5 inches. I love 5 inches. Look at them all. Spectacular. Look like red-billed 5 inches. See the beautiful colours, the carotenoids in the feathers. So Jamesons and red-billed 5 inches look fairly similar. Both have quite reddish heads, but you can see that sort of pinkish tinge to the beaks. So again, with my poor knowledge of Kenyan birds, I would assume red-billed 5 inches. And these will be the females with the less red coloration on them. So I've got having a little bit of frustration at the moment in my garden. I recently bought myself a bird feeder, and of course, as I'm sure we all do, we expect to hang a bird feeder and then have hundreds of birds gathering within minutes. I've got seed on it. I bought suet. I bought some rather horrible looking stuff called nutter butter, which is a mixture of all sorts. There's mealworms and things in there. Been putting fruit out. And thus far, I've had one species in the last week at my bird feeder, but I do know it takes a little bit of time. They say it could take up to a month for birds to discover one's bird feeder. But I will be well, I am very eagerly awaiting every morning, going out, having my morning cup of tea, and watching the bird feeder, hoping. But thus far, I've only had a couple of dark-capped bulbuls come and visit. But I'm hoping that the birds will soon discover it, and then it'll be great to keep a list of all the different birds. In the area that I stay now, having only been here for a couple of months, my bird list is already up to 116, 117 species on this estate, the wildlife estate that I'm now staying on. I've had finfoots and half-collared kingfishers, reputed Bell's fishing owl somewhere that have been spotted here, but recently did get a beautiful view of a European honey buzzard, which I was very, very chuffed with. Oh, there was a lovely blue waxbill in stark contrast to the 5 inches. They are pretty red birds, Rosie Adams. They are indeed one of my favourites. And looking particularly vibrant, I must say, at the moment. But breeding season, those birds will develop more prevalent colours to attract the ladies. Beautiful to see so many of these 5 inches. They're always a good sign if you're ever lost out in the bush. Of course, your most important thing is to try and find water. And if you hear or see lots of 5 inches and waxbills and other little seed-eating birds, they are pretty water dependent. So there is a good chance that there will be water somewhere close by. It may not be perfect water for your needs, but it's something that you could look out for. Because remember, eating just seeds, there's not a great moisture content when your diet is that of a granivore or a seed eater. So they are quite water dependent birds, all of these small little seed eating things, doves as well, for that matter. And so often a good place to find them in and around roadsides, particularly this time of year, because as cars drive along the roads, they disturb the seeds. The seeds fall onto the ground and they're much more easily visible to little seed-eating birds like this on the road than they would be nestled in some thick grass. And even if you didn't know what this bird ate, if we could still see it, if you look at the conical shape of the bill, that short cone-shaped bill is quite indicative of a seed-eating bird. You can tell a lot from a bird's diet just by looking at the shape of its beak. Ah, leopard lover, you're invested in my birding situation. The water supply is good. I do have a bird bath. In fact, I have two little bird baths, one of them very, very close to the bird feeder. And that is attracting one or two things. I have said those bulbuls have definitely found it, but not much else yet. A lot of things flitting around, a lot of sunbirds I've noticed of late. Scarlet-chested sunbirds everywhere at the moment, and the white-bellied. So I think possibly a nectar feeder will be the next thing. But say these things do take, can't expect to put up a bird feeder and have a massive diversity of species within moments. But I'm still going to be optimistic. And it's good fun going out and having a look every morning and see what may or may not be forthcoming. Penelope Kenyon, you're also agreeing, have a bird bath. The bird bath is there, do not worry. The bath is there. It is constantly filled with water, with a little sprinkling of seeds around it as well, just in case. But I will keep you informed of any more movement. Beautiful moment between these young impalas, a little bit of hello grooming. Very common to see on and around the face and the neck, areas where it is very difficult to groom oneself. So what a beautiful, tender moment. One at the back looks like he's really enjoying that. Look at those rather doughy eyes. It's very, very special to see. And so very reciprocal, this process. Generally, it's do unto you as you would have done unto do unto others as you would have done unto you. If you get groomed for 10 seconds, you'll get 10 seconds of grooming back, and vice versa. Oh, that's like us catching a little dog or a cat's head, and all the eyes go all heavy. See the way they're running the teeth through the fur? You can actually even see that little gap in the. Nina Brown, they always do look very clean. It's a good sign that the animal's in good condition. Nice, shiny fur. They actually do get a lot of ticks. They're what we call an ecotone species, which means they like those areas that are kind of borders between two different habitats. So on the fringes of more open grasslands and woodlands, that's where they seem to like to hang out. And for whatever reason, those areas seem to carry a higher tick load than being in the center of specific habitats. So impalas actually do get a lot of ticks, but unlike many other animals, say they have these wonderful adaptations to deal with them. They have, say, those little gaps in their lower incisor teeth for removing ticks. The teeth are actually, so they groom themselves. They are one of very few antelopes which will do exactly what we've just seen, that allo grooming. Yeah, we could groom ourselves a little bit, but you're going to struggle to reach their own necks and, of course, areas around the skull. Oh, what's that? A squirrel. And again, the black lines on their bottoms, often called by many as "follow me" signs, but I actually believe that they are more of a tick dealing mechanism. So ticks generally like to affix themselves to those shady, moister, warm areas around the anus, around the groin, around the armpits, if you will. Um, and if you watch the impala's tail, they're constantly flicking. So whilst those ticks are trying to embed themselves into the skin, the tail bashes them onto those black stripes. The black stripes absorb heat, being black in hot sunshine. The ticks don't want to be in direct sunlight. They can't go back towards those shadier areas because the tail bangs them around. So they move around onto the flanks and onto the belly where the impala is capable of grooming itself. So a little anti-tick mechanism inbuilt. Beautiful little squirrel eating one of the acacia pods there. Looks like an umbrella thorn pod. Beautiful white markings around the eyes. Look at that. I saw there was, speaking of squirrels, some interesting behavior being exhibited by some squirrels in America. I think it's in California. There's been an explosion in the vole population. And it seems that a lot of the squirrels in that area have taken to hunting and eating voles, which is very unusual for a squirrel, generally not considered to be carnivorous at all, surviving on exactly this sort of thing, seeds and little vegetative matter. So yeah, apparently they've been hunting voles and eating their entire heads, bones and alls, the skulls, and then literally tearing flesh off the bones of those voles and eating them. But I suppose protein supplement, if it's in, uh, if there's lots of it around, why would you say no, thank you? Just shows the adaptability of nature. Hmm. Always looks as if they're eating in fast forward, doesn't it? Well, then Toro has been spectacular today. I've thoroughly enjoyed those vibrant firefinches. Absolutely beautiful, tender moments between some impala lambs, and now a lovely female squirrel feasting on these acacia pods. Looks like she's got youngsters as well. Very obvious mammary glands. Again, right time of year. Canine girl, obviously back to our impala and tick discussion we were having. Yes, just like any animal, if they are infested with ticks, they can get diseases from them if it's not controlled or if there are simply too many of them. Red water, which is also known as babesiosis, I think it is one that I know that impalas can get. Whether they do in this area, I'm not so sure. But definitely they can. So very important that they groom themselves and each other. And even if they don't get some sort of nasty pathogen, then it is quite possible that they will just lose condition more than anything else. Mites also a bit of a problem in certain areas, depending on what's there. So yeah, it is something that does need to be controlled. He's off. Oh, so we've got a 5 inch back. I'm amazed by the color, whether or not that's they just look far more vibrant than the red-billed firefinches we get here. Whether that's the saturation levels of the camera, whether it's the contrast of the green or the greenery, I'm not sure, but they just look incredibly vibrant. And those birds have made my day, as has the squirrel. It's just been an absolutely wonderful afternoon. Elephants, we've had vultures feeding, and all these little wonders here up in Lentoro. Found something else. So cute. Developing a newfound love for squirrels. Mindy Tillipau, yes, absolutely they do. Male squirrels have exceptionally large genitals to their body size. I don't want to say the largest of all comparatively, but certainly up there. But only during the breeding season. They're a little bit like birds in that regard, in that during the non-breeding season, the testicles shrink rather dramatically. But yes, in the summer season, in breeding season, it is fairly obvious if you're looking at a male squirrel when he sits up like that female does. It looks like he's sitting on two cushions, to be honest. There are other animals that do that. Say birds are the most obvious example that their genitals, uh, say expand is the wrong word, but increase in size, both males and females during the breeding season, and then slowly start to sort of, it's another one, disappear again. Again, that's more of an adaptation for flight, because why would you want to carry around heavy genitals if you don't have to, if it's not breeding season? But I think rodents in general do that, but very, very prominently so in squirrels. I'm sure there are other animals that exhibit similar morphological changes during certain times of the year, which will be controlled by hormone releases, of course. But they're escaping me as to specifically which ones. I'm sure some people will be able to advise. Be interesting if this is a boy. Is this the other one? Are you going to come closer so we can see? Oop. Ah, hello, little emerald spotted wood dove. Not sure if they get blue spotted dove up in Kenya. That's still one that I need to tick off my list, but very, very rarely seen in South Africa. Did see a tambourine dove here not too long ago. Beautiful starling. Yeah, it'd be interesting if we can see that dove having a drink, because when we were watching the firefinches drink, they have to sort of scoop up water into that lower mandible of their beak and then put their heads back because they're unable to create a vacuum. Ah, it's disappeared. Doves, one of the few birds that can do that. So doves you'll just see putting their beak in the water and just sucking up water like a straw, whereas most other birds have to scoop up water and put their heads back to drink. Beautiful iridescence on the starling. It looks blue, but there's definitely a purplish tinge as well. Magnificent. Come have a drink, Mr. Dove, and illustrate what we were discussing. Okay, that was just dunking one's face in the water. I believe that's starting to be a Rupel's starling, having just done a quick check. Again, feel free to correct me. I'm by no means a Kenyan bird expert. Just trying very hard to elude the camera. Ah, there we go. Nope, off again. Such a lovely camera, this one, to be at almost eye level with the bank. Leads to some beautiful perspective. or cabbage doves. Jolene, you're wanting to know whether there are bird species where the female has brighter colours than the male? Yes, there are. There are few, very few in comparison, but certainly there are. What are you, a red-eyed dove? I assume so. The one that springs to mind is the greater painted snipe, which is a polyandrous bird species, meaning that the female will mate with multiple male partners, and therefore wants to attract multiple male partners to her. I mean, it's normally the other way around in birds. It's either monogamous pairs, which is the majority, or then we get polygynous species, things like the widers, for example, whereby one male will advertise his presence and attract multiple females. So you'll normally see things like the pin-tailed widers have been out recently, whereby you can see the way he stuck his beak in there, and you can see their throat suctioning in the water. They will do their displaying in their arenas or leks, as they are known, trying to attract multiple female partners. So in some polyandrous species, for example, the greater painted snipe, the female is larger and more brightly coloured in order to attract the male's attention. Not always the case in polyandrous birds, of which are only about 1% of species worldwide. So the African jacana, for example, is a polyandrous species, and there's no obvious dimorphism between the sexes there, but we certainly see it in the greater painted snipe. Some lovely leaves. Apparently, there's also something called an eclectus parrot, which has a more brightly coloured female than male. Males in the eclectus parrot are a beautiful leafy green colour, whereas the females are actually very, very striking. They described as a candy corn coloured. Oh, sorry, no, that's the male, but the female is sort of a purple and red and violet colours. Absolutely beautiful. Oh, eclectus parrot. Yeah, you see that stark contrast in the drinking style there. We saw the doves just siphoning water up through the beak, and here we can see the scooping and then the head back. Be interesting if anybody out there knows if there are any other birds that are able to drink or suck up water through their straw. So you could see the sort of the pumping action of the throat and of the tongue, which creates that suction, which we see in the Columbidae family. So all the doves and pigeons. I don't know if there are any other families of birds that are capable of doing so. So most rely on scooping and gravity to get water down the throat. I think it's a physiological adaptation or a morphological evolution of purely the Columbidae family. But I'd be interested to know if anybody has witnessed it before in other species. Sugarbits, you're saying these are the most beautiful birds you've seen in a long time. Absolutely. Although I should say, go check out the Eclectus parrot, because that is really quite spectacular as well. I'm guessing it's a South American thing. But yes, not often that we see such vibrancy here, but beauty of this time of year. So the scarlet-chested sunbirds, which are everywhere at the moment where I am, are also one of my favourites. That contrasting red and black is really striking. But these red-billed firefinches do seem kind of brighter than normal. But I think a lot of that is to do with the saturation of the camera. You can see just how green the leaves are behind, but still it works wonderfully well. And I'm blown away by these eye rings on these squirrels as well. We don't see it in the species that we get down here, not so prominent. Whether or well, one assumes that that is some sort of communication, body language adaptation going on, to whether it's to draw attention to the eye, to make the eye look bigger, whether it be in confrontational exchanges or in simple social situations. Very, very striking. Leopard lover, you're asking what's the ones get the oldest? Um, well, on either case, I would be guessing, but certainly the ground hornbills can get to quite great ages. Some of the eagles, I would go with ground hornbill. Just trying to think if there's anything else that pops into my head. But I mean, they can get up to 60, 70 years, I think, if I recall. That might be a bit excessive. I'll have to check for you, leopard lover. In terms of the oldest species, in terms of what's been here the longest, that I would not have a clue, I'm afraid. That's something that I would have to delve into a little bit of research about. I read something recently about a particularly old bird, a type of gull that was maybe 74, 75 years of age. And if you'd have asked me before about ground hornbills, I would have said 40 or 50, but I've got a funny feeling I read something recently that suggested that they could get a little bit older than that. I've just done a quick check, and they say in captivity, ground hornbills can live over 70 years in captivity. Out in the wild, it's more sort of 40 to 50 would be a good age, which is still a lot longer than we tend to think of for birds. I can't imagine that there are many older than that here. You generally find that the bigger the bird, the longer you lived. It wasn't a gull, sorry, that I was thinking of, the 74, 75. It was an albatross, one of the albatrosses. Oh, hello, Roller. Wow, it's a cacophony of avian colour today. A la Ramor, you've sort of proposing hummingbirds and eating nectar, but you also think they lick at it as opposed to suck up the nectar. Of course, we don't get hummingbirds here, so I wouldn't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure our sunbirds also lap at the nectar as opposed to sucking it up. So yeah, I did do a quick check whilst we were discussing it, or just after having done so, and as far as I can see from a very quick search online, it does seem to be something that's fairly unique to the pigeon and dove family of birds. And suddenly all was quiet. But what a fantastic visit to Lentoro that has been. I'm sure there'll be more forthcoming. But very special. Just shows that you don't have to have elephants and cats all the time to enjoy it. That's been a wonderful half an hour or so we've spent here with some vibrant birds, some beautiful impalas, and some incredibly cute squirrel action. Okay, speaking of birds, it seems like we've got one of the largest birds up at Tau in Madikwe. Let's go have a look. Hello, boy. So ostriches can also get up to around about the 30 to 40 years of age. But who would have thought that a ground hornbill would surpass them? But so ground hornbills do look rather always think they look rather prehistoric. Had a beautiful sighting of a trumpeter hornbill. Went up to the Blythe River Canyon itself a few days ago and went on a little bit of a hike, a bit of a trail around there, and had a incredibly up close and personal experience with a trumpeter hornbill that was sitting on a branch, maybe 3 meters away. I mean, it was so close I had to take a step back to get it in my binoculars to really appreciate its lovely casque and those beautiful eyelashes that the hornbills have got. Oh, tough day, ostrich. You can see just how vibrant and red that beak is as well. So again, ostrich breeding season at the moment. And if he was to stand up, I would imagine we would see very, very reddish legs, particularly down the front of the shins, which will fade during the non-breeding season. But again, just like birds getting um, their breeding plumage as opposed to their eclipse plumage during the winter months, male ostriches will advertise their readiness by developing these much pinker areas around the beak and on the legs. Oh, look at a scratch. And if anybody is wondering whether or not there may be a nest involved here, I think it would be highly unlikely, although ostriches do create their nests just with scrapes on the ground. But generally speaking, you'll find that the female will do the incubating during the daytime, and the male will incubate at night. Female has that much browner color, which is far better camouflage for the day. Oh, up periscope. And the male will usually incubate at night time. Wow, loads of water at Tau from the last time I saw it as well. Sure, it's a veritable ocean in front of Tau. And just for the record, in case anybody was wondering, ostriches do not bury their head in the sand, although I thought perhaps he was about to, with the way he put his head down on the ground before. Interesting where that idea have come from, but we actually think it stems right the way back to Roman times and a gentleman named Pliny the Elder who apparently put together one of the earliest encyclopedias. And it's all just been misconstrued with the fact that ostriches will eat anything and they'll often bury their heads sort of deep into bushes to try and find food on the ground. That for some reason, the idea of them burying their head in the sand came about. But there is no suggestion or evidence to suggest that when they get scared, they suddenly bury their head in the sand. Unfortunately, because that would be quite amusing to see. Looks like a red knobbed coop with a blacksmith's lapwing as well. So nice to see so much water. It was looking very, very low last time I visited Tao here via the waterhole cameras. Such an incredible substance, something we take for granted. Only 0.1% of all the water on Earth is possible that we can drink. So we really must make very, very good use of it and enjoy it whilst we can. But incredible stuff. Without water, there is no life. Funny, really, when you think it's just made up of two of the simplest elements in the entire, whatever you want to call it, universe, world, just hydrogen and oxygen. One oxygen molecule with a couple of hydrogens stuck to it and a couple of free floating electrons. The hydrogen's positively charged, the electron's negatively charged, and they stick together in this loose, sort of floppy consistency to create water. But the fact that it remains a fluid from 0 degrees to 100 degrees, assuming you're not at altitude, of course, where air pressure changes or air density changes, mean that it's slightly different. But to have a 100-degree um, range whereby your structure remains the same is pretty unique. It's a solvent. It dissolves chemicals. It transports nutrients. It binds cells together, gives things rigidity, used for so many aspects of our lives. Okay, I think we are going to head over to Stony Point. Speaking of water, let's go look at lots. Wow, and an awful lot of what look to be cormorants of some description. It's a whole lot of cormorants. So we get about 5 or 6 different species of cormorant here, many of which do occur along the west coast. If you take a closer look to give you a completely positive ID, I'm imagining that they're probably, no, I was going to go with Cape cormorants, but I don't see that characteristic yellow at the base of the gape. I think that's the most likely. Yeah, it definitely looks like a big group of Cape cormorants. You can see that they often use this little stony point, this little rocky outcrop. See, just absolutely coated in uric acid. Another excellent way to deal with the rigors of flight. Water is heavy, possesses so many properties, but it is heavy, and you don't want to be flying around with a full bladder. So rather not carry around water and have very concentrated uric acid crystals, which can be expelled. Great to see so many of them. Amazing things, can dive at a speed of more than a meter a second, or there or thereabouts, which is pretty impressive. Can hold their breath under duress for well over a minute on their diving trips. Nice to see a beach. I haven't seen a beach for a while. No sign of our Dessies today. remember a month or so ago when I was doing this, we saw little ones suckling, which was the first time I've ever seen that. Ah, some penguins. I haven't been down to this area for a very, very long time. I have, of course, seen the famous penguins, but not for probably over a decade now. About time I took a trip down that side of the country. I keep thinking about heading down there and wanting to go to the Karoo, but it's so far from here. You don't realise just how far it is. I mean, to drive to Cape Town and back is about 2,000 kilometres each way from here. And with the price of petrol and diesel, not always viable at the moment. Jolene, are lizards the only reptiles that can be found at sea? Sea snakes? Beyond that, turtles. Good question, Jillian. That's going to take some double checking for you. There must be some others. Do Komodo dragons go into the sea? I suppose that's a lizard, though, isn't it? Yeah, well, a deluge of questions to which I'm not so sure about. Jolene, I'll have to get back to you tomorrow because we're almost out of time with regards to your reptiles at sea question. But that's a good one. And Martin also wanting to know how does that uric acid that bird droppings break down? Is it through the salt in the water? Is it chemical action? I think a lot of it is will get washed off, and that what we see is often just stain because it's a uric acid. It reacts chemically with the rocks and actually stains it like an acid. But again, I will have to double check, and it can be quite corrosive. But yeah, whether or not I imagine it just if it's nitrogen based, which it is, whether I assume therefore it's good for the environment, just like a nitrogen based fertilizer, and why any waste product is good for soil and things. But I will have to do a bit of checking up and get back to you tomorrow, Jolene and Martin. But good questions. Joining us. Don't forget our Sunset Drive. We'll be heading out in the not too distant future. I'm sure there will be many great things to see. I'll be back again tomorrow, 12:30 Central African time, and we will delight in all that our cameras have to offer. But it's been a great day from elephants, but I think for me, Lentoro stole the show with our birds, our grooming impalas, and our lovely little squirrels. So yeah, some great sights. But thanks everybody for joining us. A happy new year to one and all. I hope 2025 is going to be a brilliant year for all of you. But yeah, do stick with us for the rest of the afternoon and join me again tomorrow from 12:30.